Hello everyone, and welcome back, and thank you for joining me for part 3 of my One Piece journey. This time around we'll be covering the Baratie arc. I'm pretty sure that's how it's pronounced. Baratie, one of those two. If it's not, then you can complain to all the people in chat who told me that that's how it was pronounced. I don't plan to say that name too often in this video, but Baratie. We'll be talking about that today. There won't be a huge introduction or a huge preamble this video like there were for the first two videos, and once again I apologize for that, but for these sorts of series you have to establish sort of things that people should know, housekeeping details and things like that, so I think it was kind of necessary, but we're going to be jumping right into it this week. Before we do, however, just a reminder that if you would like early access after watching this one, if you would like early access to the next, my next reaction and review to the next One Piece arc, that is currently available on Patreon if you're watching this public on YouTube. So for $5, you can watch the next arc review right now, or right after you finish this video. Just a little bit of something extra for anyone interested in that, and a little bit of something extra for my loyal, beautiful patrons. I like to give them something whenever I can, because I don't offer them enough, to be honest. Almost forgot to add this part. One other thing is that, for anyone who isn't aware, I'm streaming my entire read-through. Every single chapter I read will be streamed on Twitch, on my Twitch account, so you can follow that if you're interested in joining in. We've got a really great community. We've got a lot of people sharing lots of insight and enthusiasm and really enhancing my experience, but the mods are also on top of it to make sure that I'm not spoiled. It's generally a great time. I read chapters every week, every Sunday for sure, with extra days here and there. So there's that if you're interested. And lastly, if there is a comment or something you want to share, a bit of insight, an interesting tidbit, something that you would like for me to read on screen live while I record the arc 2 videos from now, then you can add the hashtag AJPiece to your comment, either in the beginning, the end, somewhere in there, and my mods will select a small handful for me to read for the first time when I record that arc video. I'd love to make it so that I can read these comments and highlight them the very next video, but because of Patreon early access and all of that, that kind of skews it a little bit, so it'll be 2 videos from now that I'll read it. It's not like I'm going to forget the events of Syrup Village or Baratie or any bits of insight you have about those arcs 2 arcs later or anything like that. So hopefully you guys understand that, and hopefully you're still down for that. I look forward to all the comments, all the enthusiasm. You guys have been so great. All the support. I said this last time, but it bears repeating. All the support has been really wonderful. All the enthusiasm from whether it be casual or diehard One Piece fans who are invested in my journey, who are just so positive and welcoming and wholesome and sharing their interpretations and facts and tidbits. Thank you very much. In streams, in the videos, in the comments, and DMs on Twitter, everything. It's been a great experience, and it has been heightened and elevated because of the community. And something that bears mentioning is that I don't remember the exact points that I will make in the video that apply to this, but there were a couple of things throughout that people in my Twitch chat would tell me about, or an observation they would make, that I am going to say here. So just to be clear, there are a couple of things that I'm going to be saying here that I did not come to independently. I'll try to, if I can remember which ones they are, I'll try to point them out, but I might have forgotten the specific ones. But just be aware of that. Anyways, let's hop right into Baratie. So just right off the bat, if you want to know my overall impressions, this was my favorite arc in One Piece so far. Pretty clearly, I don't think it's, so far and away above everything else, but I do think it's quite clearly above everything else. I think it's got the most well-rounded and substantial character work that any arc has done. I think it hits on multiple levels and does so many different things for so many different characters and themes on a way that's just on another level. And to that end, I think it's got more complexity than any other arc in One Piece has. I'm going to be talking about the characters, but Sanji himself, the character of Sanji, I think at this point he has to be the most complex in One Piece that's been introduced so far. Nami, maybe she'll end up being more complex, but, we haven't really gotten the internalization that I think the story will get to. Perhaps that'll be in the next arc. There was definitely a hint that she was going to be central to the next arc, so maybe. But At this point, I would say that Sanji is the most complex character. There are lots of layers to him, lots of different elements to him. He's just a bit different from the likes of Luffy, Usopp, Zoro. With Luffy, he is the quintessential what you see is what you get sort of character. Zoro, he's very simple as well. Amazing character, we'll get into Zoro, but quite simple. But Sanji, not only does he oppose them philosophically and ideologically in a lot of ways, but there are aspects to him that you can interpret in lots of different ways. I actually had an interpretation that was then kind of revamped and morphed because of people telling me some things about him that kind of made sense that I overlooked or just didn't quite interpret in that way, but now looking at it back, I've integrated into my original hypothesis about him, I guess you could say, and now I have a more well-rounded interpretation of who the character is, and that interpretation is pretty multifaceted. I just think it's interesting how you can interpret a lot of different things about his character in a lot of different ways. Long may that continue. I hope that we continue to explore Sanji and what he's all about, but we'll get to that in a bit. And just some scattered notes before we dive into the actual meat and potatoes of the arc. Like I said, Nami, that's probably the primary hook for me for One Piece at the moment, is seeing where Nami's going, why she left, because I might as well just talk about this right now. In the middle of the arc, she just kind of has a quote-unquote betrayal. She leaves the Straw Hats, she steals a boat, I think it was, and she says her time with Luffy and Zoro and Usopp was quote-unquote fun, and then she, nonetheless, seems to be resolute in heading off with this ship. But there's a look in her eye that kind of tells you that there's more to this, that perhaps she's more attached to her crew, even in this short of a time, than she may have thought in the first place, or than she's willing to admit outwardly. There was a really nice panel there where you could just see there was some inner conflict there. There's sadness, there's some reluctance. It just illustrates that she's grown close to this group, kind of an extension of what I said in the Syrup Village video about how it's clear that there is camaraderie building between her and Zoro and Luffy and everyone. But then, whatever chapter it was that she leaves, it progresses and gets to a point where she's crying, she's bawling. Whether that is due to her not really wanting to leave, or something else regarding her backstory, or potentially a combination of both. I don't think this is mutually exclusive. I'm not sure what it is, but she is bawling. There are tears streaming down her face, and she says, "I can't wait to be free. Belle-Mère," or my French is very rusty, but Belle-Mère, I don't know. She says, she refers to someone called Belle-Mère, and she says, "I can't wait to be free." So that's a great hook. I don't know why she isn't free currently, or, the story's alluded to the idea of her being shackled by potentially her idea of what a pirate is and how it relates to her past and how they've hurt her in the past. Maybe something that happened in her backstory has caused her to feel shackled and chained down and not able to fully express herself or make connections or something like that. Just spitballing. And then the second part of this is, who is Belle-Mère? Who is that? Is that the person who was hurt by pirates, or that she lost, or I'm not sure. But either way, it's a great hook for what I assume will be part of the next arc. I'm not sure. Don't tell me if I'm wrong, but I imagine the next arc will involve heavy Nami focus, which I'm definitely down for. But yeah, that's the extent of her role in the arc. Lots of hooks, lots of intrigue, lots of weight put on her and plot relevance, but she definitely wasn't the star of the show here. And then I just want to make some notes about Usopp. He was even less featured than Nami, which kind of makes sense for some balance. He was the star of Syrup Village. He had amazing character work in Syrup Village, and, there were some nice lines here and there, some nice humor, a continuation of the human aspects to him, how easily he's scared, and yet how brave he can be, how he's growing closer with the rest of the Straw Hats and the crew. Some nice little bits about Usopp, but I don't have too much to say about it. He was good. He was solid, but he doesn't play much of a huge role at all. Oh, and just, circling back to Nami for a second, since we're just talking about her right here, might as well say a really interesting thing about Nami is that after Luffy learns that she leaves, he says that, the idea is brought up that, we need a new navigator, or maybe you should get a new navigator. Somehow that's brought up, and then Luffy just goes, "No, Nami is my navigator." And I love how dead set he is on that. I love how focused he is on Nami being the one. She is part of his crew. She may forever be a part of his crew just because of this little bit of time that she spent with them. She's one with them. And I feel like Luffy feels that way as well and won't be satisfied with anyone else at this point, which may play a factor into the next arc, or whatever arc covers her. So that's really cool as well. But yeah, in terms of the other characters in the arc, some ones that I want to mention but won't talk about a huge amount. Patty was quite interesting, very minor, but nonetheless, I found it interesting that Patty, the one of the cooks on Baratie, was so focused about the customer is God, right? The customer, what the customer says goes, we must please the customer, we need customers, very customer-centric. And then a couple of chapters after that's introduced, we get told why that is. And that's because the customer is the provider of money, of funds. And that is why the customer is God. It's not that the customer themselves are God, or the philosophy of cooking being for the customer, but money ruling all. Very capitalistic in a way, and I just found that interesting. And then there's Gin and Krieg, the primary antagonist, I guess, for this arc, in terms of the people I want to talk about. Gin was super interesting. Actually, you know what? I think I'll talk about Gin later on. But in terms of Krieg, I found him to be very effective, very solid as an antagonist for this arc, and I found his philosophy to be really interesting. I don't think he was quite as good as Captain Kudo, but I do think he was very interesting because he is so fixated on the idea of kind of similar to history is written by the victors. Victory is all that matters in war. No matter what means you use, if it ends in victory, it is justified because history is written by the victors. All that matters in war is coming out on top. I love it because there's a moment where he uses poison gas as a weapon. Poison, which is classically thought of as a cowardly weapon, a dishonorable weapon, but nonetheless he has immense pride in this because it is the ultimate thing that will, in his eyes, lead to his victory. Victory being the ultimate goal here, to continue his motives, to continue his pillaging and whatever else he wants to do, and to continue his quote-unquote adventure and his idea of what piracy is. So it's just another philosophy to add to the litany of pirate ideologies that have been introduced into the series. Another unique way of looking at warfare and what it means to be a pirate and the spirit of piracy and the spirit of war. And an interesting one. I found a lot of his lines to be quite interesting, quite profound in a lot of ways, quite subversive. And I liked him. I liked Krieg quite a bit. And then aside from those, like I said, Gin was very solid. I liked him a lot. But we'll talk about him. Sanji, very effective introduction. Zeph was great. And Mihawk, Zoro, Luffy, this arc did so much for so many characters. And yeah, I was very hyped throughout the entire thing. And then a couple more little details before diving in. There was a lot of conflict throughout this arc. A lot of fights, and I found that they were actually, in this arc, that they flowed the best. I don't know about the most interesting to look at, but they were the fights that I felt I was most immersed in and engaged with. They were very raw, and the art was quite simplistic, but it felt intentionally unpolished, and it flew from page to page and panel to panel in a really effective way. And I think the rawness and the unpolished nature of it was really good in getting across the brutality of these fights, while at the same time adding this nice flow to it. So I thought the fights here were the best they've been so far. And another thing, I continue to read SBS, the question and answer sort of thing for Oda and the fans in the back of the chapters, and he mentioned something about a panda guy. Someone noticed a panda man in the background of one of the panels in maybe Syrup Village or something. I'm not sure. But Oda says, yes, I'm glad you noticed the panda guy. He will be very important. And then a few chapters later in the arc, there's like a whole character bio for the panda. I don't know what that is. I don't know. I don't know if it's a meme. I don't know if it's an inside joke or if this panda actually becomes important. I have no clue, but a lot of people in chat were laughing at my cluelessness, which was pretty funny. I'm not sure what that's going to do, but I thought it was worth making a note about. And the cover stories continue, which I'm glad about. They progress things and help the world to feel rich and lived in, and living and breathing and expansive as these underlying plot events happen, despite the overlying story of the arc that we're reading right now. It continues to be focused on Buggy, as he becomes friends with Gaimon, actually, from chapter 22, which is cool. It progresses. There's a mystery woman who seems to make friends with Buggy and ask about Luffy, and they may be pursuing Luffy. They come across some lions or giant ferocious beasts. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on in the background through the cover stories, so worth mentioning that as well. I wonder when it'll come to the fore. And the last detail I want to talk about before diving in would be throughout the chapters of this arc, we have characters alluding to the mystical, powerful nature of the Grand Line and how larger than life and threatening this place is. We have Mihawk, my goodness. We have Mihawk, who essentially is a personification. He's much more than a personification of this, but in some ways is a personification of the idea that the Grand Line is so beyond what we've had our characters idealistically talking about how they're going to reach it, but it's so beyond from a power level what they're ready for at this moment. Being face to face with this guy who's been there, who's done that, who's conquered the Grand Line and been a threat there, it really enhances the mystique of the place. And it makes it feel like, okay, our crew need to kind of step it up a little bit if they want to explore those waters. And there are just bits and pieces that are continuously added throughout the arc about the Grand Line and the type of place it is, even outside of Mihawk, that really add an identity to the place. It enriches the place. It makes it puts an idea in your mind of what the place is like, and it makes it a bit of an enigma, a bit of a mystery, a bit of something that you want to explore the more you hear about it in bits and pieces. It's very integrative, and I think it's an effective way of building up a setting. So I really like that. I don't know that our idea of the Grand Line will be fully formed by the time we get there, but I think we'll have a fully formed idea or impression of what it may be like, which I'm sure will be subverted in many ways, but nonetheless, I think it's effective to have us look forward to it in this way and piece things together in our mind and interpret what it may end up being. I just like it. I think it's really effective. Just little bits of integrative ideas and word of mouth and breadcrumbs for you to, in the back of your mind, substantiate this setting and this place and what it will be like. It just adds another hook, it adds some more intrigue, and it enriches the setting even more. But to get into the plot proper now, we start the arc as we see our crew come upon the ocean-going restaurant, the Baratie. We're gradually introduced to the crew. We see the likes of Patty, some other cooks. We see this mystery man skulking in the background, Sanji, and I love the way that things are sort of gradually fed to us as we get into this new mini-adventure. Immediately, what's introduced as a primary theme here is that of food, of what it represents for different people, of how it is a universal conduit for connection and joy and expressing affection, of expressing appreciation for life in general. Food is a beautiful thing. It's where husbands and wives can share a meal and connect after a long, hard day. It's where families can continue to bond. It's a source of comfort, maybe at the end of a tumultuous day. Food can do so many things, and it's one of the beauties of the world. And immediately this arc kind of dwells on the idea of food and makes it clear that food and cooks and how they view food and what food means will be very important. The specifics are not shown until much later, but this is clear from the beginning, and that's done through the introduction of Sanji. Sanji is great, and there are immediately a bunch of lines that make you just think about him and wonder what he's all about. Early on, he says something along the lines of, "To offend a cook at sea is a mistake," and then he goes on to say, "Food must never be wasted. Food can never be wasted. Food is that important, it is that essential, no matter what, don't ever waste food." And you go, okay, there's something there. There's something behind that, and that was a great hook for his character for me to want to understand more about him and why he came to think this way, because it's a relatable idea. Everyone loves food, but Oda's not just gonna put that line in there and put such emphasis on the idea without expanding upon it in a backstory or fleshing out the character in some other way or something. So that there really kind of engrossed me and made me wonder more of what he was all about. And Sanji was from the beginning very fixated on pride, on not being insulted in multiple ways, on not having the restaurant be insulted. And what's key here is that he was okay about him himself being insulted. There's a line somewhere in there that says, like, "You can insult me as a person, but don't you dare insult my cooking." So there's a separation between the person he is and the cooking, not in terms of his character, because I think they're intertwined, but in terms of how he interacts with the world. In the beginning of this arc, those are segregated for him. One can be insulted and the other can't, so he places a greater importance on something other than himself, which is his cooking. So this idea, this focus on cooking, on the importance of food, on food not being wasted, it all was really effective in drawing me into Sanji and wondering what the hell was going on with this guy. And along with that, we have someone from an opposing crew, a pirate crew, Gin, who ends up being a pretty important character, who was labeled as this guy that no one should want to help on Baratie because he's a pirate, he's done harm to them, he's in an opposing faction. Who knows what he could do if he was fed or supported or things like that. Who knows what he'll do if he's helped here. But nonetheless, Sanji doesn't give a lick about any of that. He goes out and feeds him. So Sanji provides this little act of kindness here. Now, at the time, whether it was because Sanji was a kind person or because he just thought that food was this almighty thing that should be shared among everyone, or a bit of both, I wasn't aware. But it is really interesting that he did that. And all this stuff about this and everything before with Sanji and his relationship with food and cooking and everything, it helps you to be immersed in the character and want to know more, and that lurked in the background because he doesn't come into prominence until around the second half of Baratie, but the introductory chapters do a great job of making him present and making you very interested in him and his input, despite the plot going in different directions. And what's notable, a really interesting character note about Luffy is that immediately after seeing this bit of kindness that he shows towards helping Gin and giving him this food, Luffy wants him to become his cook, to become the cook of the Straw Hats. That's part of the reason they came here in the first place. The primary reason was because they need a cook. They're going to get scurvy if not, as Nami says to them earlier on. I didn't mention that, but that's a big part of the reason why they're here in the first place, to find a cook. And so Luffy sees Sanji and he goes, I want that guy. But it isn't after tasting his food, it's after seeing the kindness he shows to someone else. So this is probably not logistically or logically sound reasoning from Luffy to want to hire a guy after seeing his kindness, because kindness does not equate to good food, but it's very indicative of the type of person he is, that this is what sells him on him. Someone with good character, a good heart, clearly some principles of his own, clearly some sort of resolve and some sort of identity in what he treasures. Again, that theme of treasures been there from the beginning, it continues to be a big factor. And so Luffy observing that and deciding here and now, at this moment, that I want him to be my cook, that's very indicative of the type of person he is. But then we're introduced to Zeph, the head chef of the Baratie restaurant, and we're told that this restaurant is his treasure. So another allusion to the idea of the treasure and what people would do to defend it, and how they interact with treasures. And we see that Sanji has some sort of connection to Zeph in some way. There's some sort of history between the two that's not dwelt upon in the beginning, but what's clear is that he has a connection to Zeph, and he says that he will work here as long as possible, as long as Zeph is alive. As long as Zeph is alive and is the head of the Baratie, he will be working there. He will be the assistant chef. And that keys you into the idea that his connection is not necessarily to the restaurant itself, but to Zeph. So he loves cooking, he has this huge idea of what food means, and he doesn't want to waste food, and he seems to have these acts of kindness to other people, and he is indebted in some way to Zeph, but his connection isn't to the actual planks of wood that form the restaurant, or the restaurant itself as an ideal, physically, spiritually, whatever. It's to both Zeph and the idea of cooking, not necessarily where those two intertwine. And then a bit later on, we have Krieg, who comes in completely malnourished and needing food and asking for food, and everyone says that it's a bad idea. Everyone says that we should not do this. This is not someone we should be helping right now, but Sanji ends up doing the same and giving him food. Once again, an indicator of the type of person he is and his ideas about food and these acts of potential kindness and everything. And that ends up biting him because immediately after eating, Krieg attacks the ship and invades, and it's exactly what everyone else feared. And yet Sanji says something very interesting. He says, it's my job to feed people, not judge them. Anything beyond that gets too complicated. And so, again, it's food as this ideal, feeding people and connecting through this food and showing these acts of kindness as a simple element of his job, a simple thing that he wants to do, something that he's been taught that he should be doing, and that's my job and nothing beyond that. There's a focus and simplicity to that I think is very interesting and in a way admirable. I initially viewed this as naivete, and I made a bit of a parallel with him and Zoro and Luffy in that they're all kind of naive. You know, we talked last time, or maybe in the Orange Town arc, about why Zoro and Luffy are very simple and can be a bit naive in believing that other people will follow the honor system that they follow. For instance, we have Zoro being in prison and told that he'll be released in a week, even though he was never going to be released in a week, etc. And so I initially likened Sanji to that. But I think he was pretty self-aware of the fact that this might not turn out well for him, especially given that Zeph knew a lot about Krieg from encountering him on the Grand Line and previous encounters and whatever. So I think there's a good chance that Sanji would know all about Krieg and the type of person he is through Zeph. That's not confirmed, but there's some subtext there. Who knows? Regardless of whether or not that's true, I think that Sanji was fully accepting of the fact that he could be bitten here, but nonetheless had to provide food for someone in need of food. And that idea is very profound because it's like, what must this man have gone through to value food so much, to want to give it and not waste it to people who need it, even if those people are very likely, or at the very least it's possible for them to really betray you and stab you in the back. Why must he idealize food in this way? And what's notable about Krieg is not only did Zeph know him because of his previous experiences on the Grand Line, but Krieg fled the Grand Line. So someone this imposing, who poses this much of a threat to our characters, fled there because he wasn't strong enough, which is another thing that tells you about, you know, the scale, the power, the strength needed to succeed at the Grand Line. But what's cool is that Krieg has the same ambitions as Luffy. He says that he's going to be the king of the pirates, or he's going to have the One Piece, and then Luffy's kind of observing the whole time, but then when he hears that, he goes, no, that's me. I'm going to get the One Piece. I can't stay out of this when someone lays claim to something that will be mine. And again, there's such an endearing simplicity to that. It's like, no, once it involves this thing that I am so focused on getting, that's when I draw the line, and that's when I have to enter the fray. That's mine. And then we get some details about Baratie and what it represents. And there is immediately a found family sort of feeling to it, because we have the pirates who are defending their home who say that Baratie is what Zeph made. He made this ocean-going restaurant a home for outcasts, for people who had nowhere else to go, who had no home, who had no one to belong to, or no family to belong to, no home, abstract or otherwise. And he made this place for people to belong. And so I've got a bit of a weakness for that sort of found family sort of theme. That's why I love the Phantom Troop. That's part of why I love the Phantom Troop in Hunter x Hunter, and so that immediately adhered me a bit more to Zeph and to what Baratie represents symbolically for all these people. And then they sort of talk about the value of food, the value of kindness, and how it interrelates with food, and the contrast between that and how awful hunger is. For cooks, feeding is their duty. For cooks, feeding people is their duty, their pride and joy, and they pour themselves into it to such an extent that their identity is almost in the food they prepare and the meals they give. And so, of course, they want to defend that. As well as it being a home, it is the place where they do what they love and they do what they feel like they're born to do. So, of course, they're going to defend this to the last breath. And then we're introduced to murmurs of this man, Hawkeye, who destroyed 50 ships, or I think 48 and a half ships on the Grand Line. We hear murmurs of this, and obviously that's a precursor to Mihawk, which is super hype, but I love a lot of the different reactions to when this is brought up, because Usopp, very loyal to his character, responds in fear. He's scared of that. As you would expect, that is who he is. He's the most human, the most relatable, the most everyman-esque character of the cast. But Luffy thinks of the immense challenge there, and he is exhilarated. He is encouraged, he's impassioned, and he just wants to get there even quicker. That's what his adventures are all about. There is no fear here in seeing what you're up against, even if it is monumental, even if it is so challenging that at the moment you can't fight it or you will lose. Luffy nonetheless sees these challenges and looks at them idealistically, optimistically, as something to aspire to rather than shrink away from. And I love that in him. It, again, integrates with his simplicity, his earnest nature, his raw nature, unfiltered, how much he is who he is, and how much what you see is what you get with him. It's just a really endearing aspect to his character. But in addition to that, when the idea of this person who destroyed all these ships on the Grand Line is brought forth, the idea of Hawkeye, Zoro is extremely interested. He's immediately, he's completely consumed by the idea of this guy. And I'm going, why is he so interested in this guy? What did this guy do? And then that is answered really quickly because it is said that Hawkeye, actually I think his name might be Hawkeyes. Either way, please correct me in the comments. Either Hawkeye or Hawkeyes, whatever it is the greatest swordsman in the world. What is Zoro's goal? What is his ultimate goal? What he promised as a kid is to become the greatest swordsman. So obviously he would be super interested in Hawkeye. That's who he has to surpass. And so Zoro is completely enraptured by this. He is consumed by this, and he is completely tunnel visioned, as you would expect. This is the encapsulation of his dreams, his hopes, his treasure to an extent, in a symbolic way. This is what his life has led up to at this point. And then we have some super raw lines. I'm gonna have to just read them directly from the page if you don't mind, but we're introduced to Mihawk. Great character design. Immediately this aura of menace around him. It seems like we're authority as he enters the fray. And then we have a random grunt that goes, "You monster, why do you keep picking on us?" And he says, "For fun." So there's some low-key, or rather high-key, sadism to his character to an extent. And then we have Zoro confirm, "So you split the galleon with this sword. Okay, then this is him. This is who I've been looking for. This is who I need to defeat." And then he says, "I went to sea to find you. Why? To be the greatest." And then we have this amazingly raw line. We have Mihawk saying, "If you're a competent swordsman, you don't need to cross swords to know that I far surpass your puny skills. Does the courage to point your blade at me come from confidence or from ignorance?" Illustrating the gap in their strength. And then Zoro says, "It comes from ambition and a promise to a friend." And, I don't have much to say about that. It's just beautifully written. It sets the stage. It really invigorates you, and you just get this rush of adrenaline because it's so raw, and you're like, I just want to see these guys duke it out. And so we see that Mihawk at first doesn't really respect him. He says, "There's a huge gulf in our abilities. What are you doing? This is stupid. You can't hope to measure up to me." And he doesn't really have much respect for Zoro. And then the fight happens. And this, I have no doubts, this is the, other parts come close. We have chapter 1, we have the ending of Syrup Village, which I loved. We have the backstory for Sanji and Zeph later on, as well, as peaks of One Piece so far. But this was the peak. Zoro versus Mihawk and everything surrounding that. For me, it was the peak of One Piece storytelling so far. The character work it does for Mihawk, for Zoro, the way it's all presented, the gravity around the situation, the sheer hype, the amazing lines, Luffy's role as well. I'm gonna get into it, but it was phenomenal. Reading it on stream was so hype. Everyone was so excited. I had tons of people come in. It was my most viewed stream to date, was when I was reading the Zoro versus Mihawk fight. It was so great. And so we know Zoro. He's displaying his immense conviction. He fights him here to protect his pride as a person, as in service of his overall goal, in service of his promise and his treasure, his convictions and his ideals and his dream. And that's the catalyst for why he fights Mihawk in the first place. But there's a moment where he suddenly realizes the huge gulf in class between them, and it is a sobering moment that makes him see reality. In another context, it would be soul-shattering. For a regular person, that would be a huge stumbling block and something that would completely discourage them. But Zoro is not a regular person, and the way the chapter is presented, you keep getting flashes of the flashback from Zoro's past that we were shown in his introduction. They're just fighting and swords are swinging, and interspersed throughout are these little lines and little panels and flashbacks of the promise that he made as a kid. Just great emotional storytelling, great emotional touches to add such weight and gravity to the situation, as if we needed it. But it was just the full package. It was hype, there was deathly stakes, and then there was this emotional, thematic storytelling at the same time that really just puts everything that Zoro is up front, to the forefront, and shows you how immense this guy is. You can't help but admire him, admire his conviction in a way. And so things get more and more desperate for him. Mihawk has the upper hand the whole time, and Zoro is confronted with the idea of death. And what does he say in the face of death? He says, defeat is worse than death. And that harkens back to what I talked about in the Syrup Village arc, the idea that the physical death, the death of a person's body, is secondary to their ideals being defeated, their pride being shattered, their treasure being taken from them, or all of that. The ideological defeat is much more devastating than a physical death, as was explained by Oda in that SBS, as was said by Luffy about what he's really willing to risk his life for. To these people, to these kindred spirits, what you value more so than your physical life, than your life on this earth, or on whatever setting One Piece is that you go about your life in a way that you can be satisfied with. And what that means for these people is showing conviction in your dreams, protecting your treasure, protecting what you care about, showing resolve, and chasing after that ineffable, maybe even ephemeral dream. Losing that, losing the conviction or having your conviction stomped on and not standing up for what you love and what you believe in, that is worse than death. And that is when you're defeated. Defeat is worse than death. So that's just such a beautiful way to exemplify that theme that was introduced earlier on, but comes to a head here. Zoro's stabbed in a vital area, like right through the chest or stomach or something. It was a devastating blow. And he says that if he backs up one step from this spot, all that he stands for, all that he believes in, it will all be shattered. His dreams, his everything that he is, it will all be for nothing. It will be forfeit. And Mihawk says, yes, that is defeat. And so that, not only is that raw for Zoro, for all the reasons I've already talked about, but it makes you think about Mihawk. Does he just say that because he's experienced so much defeat, and seen other people so devastated by defeat on the battlefield from the other end of his sword? Or has he himself experienced defeat and is speaking from that experience to know and relate to what Zoro's talking about and say, that's defeat. Defeat is the complete absolute devastation of all that you stand for and all that you are. But he doesn't seem to question or contradict the idea that it's separate from your physical death, and he relates to the idea of how devastating that defeat is. So it just makes me wonder, does he have some sort of experience with that? Has he himself experienced that sort of defeat? And if so, what is that? What is the nature of that? It's an amazing introduction for Mihawk for a bunch of reasons. This is one of them. This just immediately makes me so interested in him and where he's come from, why he's come to think this way. Because Zoro prefers defeat to death. And like he says, he's gonna face everything right up front. He says, wounds to the back are a swordsman's shame. Another completely raw line. I was in heaven reading this. This was insanely good. There's such a beautiful encapsulation, beautiful writing and dialogue for the type of person Zoro is. It doesn't really add much to his character as much as enhance what he already is, what we know about him to the nth degree. It is so effective in strengthening everything this character is. This elevated him so much for me. And then we come to a topic that I think is very important about Luffy. I said this on stream half jokingly, but so much of what I love about Luffy actually comes from him observing other people. I've talked about his little glances here and there as his genuine smiles in contrast to the huge expressiveness. We can learn a lot about Luffy through the panels in which he's just watching people and very deadly serious or smiling, or there's a shadow over his eyes. The way in which Luffy observes other people and the way in which he reacts to that is so telling with regards to who he is. And that was very much the case in Mihawk versus Zoro. He is struggling so much to stop himself from jumping into the fight because Zoro is literally dying. And he cares about Zoro. They're kindred spirits, they're friends. They have this instant affinity to one another, and they are something close to brothers at this point. And he just cares for him, obviously, and doesn't want him to die. So he really wants to jump in to save him, but he tells some of the brothers, I forgot to mention them, their names escape me, but the brothers who were introduced at the beginning of the arc, who want to jump in, he tells them, don't you dare jump in. You better control yourself. Because at this point, Zoro's life is at risk, and Luffy cares for him and he wants him to survive, just like these guys do. But that is less important than Zoro's resolve. To jump in at this moment would be an insult and a disrespect to him and what he stands for. This is his fight. And it would be like defeat for him if they jumped in and helped him and interfered with this swordsman duel. And Luffy knows that because he understands Zoro. He is very much like him. So he knows that stepping in would be defeating him in a way which, like he says, is worse than death. He strains every cell in his body to hold himself back because it is so tough, and the art is so effective in so viscerally showing us how difficult it is for him. It goes back to the idea of Luffy's life being less important of pride and ideals and what you're fighting for. Luffy and Zoro are cut from the same cloth in that regard, and Luffy understands that better than anyone, so he's not going to jump in here. But it takes so much effort to not do so because of how he cares for Zoro. And it's just such a powerful and conflicting moment. And you can't help but admire, obviously Zoro, but Luffy for recognizing that. One Piece in a lot of ways kind of simultaneously demands and encourages the reader to put yourself in these shoes, even if you don't agree with these sorts of ideals. I certainly don't. I like living. But even if you don't agree with them, understand them, put yourself in these shoes, and then understand why the characters act the way they do and why these sorts of things are so admirable and meaningful. And I love that, because it's a bit of a challenge in some ways, but it's so rewarding if you do it. This is Zoro's fight. Disrespecting that is disrespecting his resolve and conviction. And it is defeat. And Luffy knows that, and he's screaming out for his friend, but he can't do it. He only jumps in when the fight is finished. And that is so key. And when Zoro is defeated here, as was inevitable, Zoro asks Luffy if he's disappointed in his defeat. If he's disappointed in him and his friend because he lost. And Luffy doesn't answer, but in my opinion, no. I don't think he ever was. I don't think he was at all. I think he would have been disappointed if he ran from the fight, if he didn't stand up for what he meant to stand up for, if he fled from this, because this was his dream, this is his ultimate goal, and it's a challenge, and he doesn't shy away from the challenge, just like Luffy doesn't shy away from the challenge of the Grand Line when he hears about how treacherous it is. So I don't think Luffy was disappointed at all. What I think he would have been disappointed in was if Zoro betrayed the sentiment of what he stood for, but he didn't. He didn't at all. He encapsulated that, he personified that, and so Luffy is so caught up in the moment that he doesn't answer him. But if I had to guess, I don't think he was disappointed at all. And then Zoro declares that he will never lose again, from now until he beats Mihawk. And then he asks Luffy, "You got that, King of the Pirates?" And so he's already crowned Luffy. It's a beautiful moment. He's already crowned him. Such as their connection, their respect, the bond shared between the two. He's already crowned him as King of the Pirates, and it's such a lovely little moment. And I think that Zoro, at the same time, recognized that Luffy did not jump in, and I think that adds to his respect for him. And Luffy, with a beaming smile, agrees and says, "All right, hell yeah." And then Mihawk, through this fight, through this display of who Zoro is and what his conviction is, in the end goes from not really caring much about Zoro at all, disrespecting him, thinking that he's not worth his time, to applauding his ideals and conviction, and saying that he will remember his name. He also respects Luffy for not jumping in and basically expresses some gratitude for him not jumping in, not until the fight was done. And so through fighting him, through this display of swordsmanship, he grows from disrespecting him, not caring much for him, to admiring him. And I love that sense of honor and mutual respect for this conviction. It just seems like, again, a bunch of kindred spirits. In that regard, at least. It seems like Mihawk very much values the same things that Zoro does, the same things that Luffy does. And seeing that in them, especially Zoro, is somewhat encouraged, admires it, and it's a beautiful show of mutual respect between them. But like I said, this also works mechanically and in plot terms, because this is a guy who completely destroyed all those ships on the Grand Line. Of course he's gonna kick Zoro's shit in. Of course he is at this moment. But it gives a benchmark to aspire to. And what he says in response to establishing this benchmark and showing how far the protagonists are from being ready is that they better not be in a hurry to die. Don't be in a hurry to die, and he'll be waiting for them to get stronger. He says, strive to surpass me, Roronoa Zoro. And he says that him and Luffy make a good team. I love this. I love it. Mihawk is easily the best antagonist so far. Easily. I said Captain Kudo was in Syrup Village. He's far and beyond better than Captain Kudo. Everything about this fight and what he represented, the threat he posed, his own ideals that were shown in the little bits and pieces, his dynamic with Zoro and Luffy to an extent as well. Everything about Mihawk is so cool. It is so raw. It's so indicative of the spirit of One Piece in a lot of ways, at least so far, and I love it. And Zoro, in response to this is his first ever defeat. He says he never saw it coming, so I'm interested to see how Zoro responds from this. Initially, it shows his resolve that he immediately seems to be able to bounce back by saying, I will never be defeated again. But outside of that moment, outside of the adrenaline coursing through him in that moment, I wonder when the dust settles how he'll be. That's one of the most interesting things for me in the upcoming arc, to see how Zoro will respond in the longer term to his defeat. Because it's not going to be super easy. Or is it? I don't know. But I'm interested nonetheless. And then one last element to all of this is Sanji. Looking on at the fight, he's seeing Zoro put everything on his line, his life on the line, saying that he will throw away his life and he would rather face defeat than death, and just putting his life out there. And Sanji in this moment says, it is so easy. Just give up on your dreams. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but he screams out to Zoro in seeing him so close to death for his ideals. Just abandon your beliefs. It's so easy to abandon your beliefs, to put them on the back burner, to just put them aside just to live another day. And so in that moment, that really struck me for Sanji. That was a great bit of characterization for him that lends you to question why exactly he says that. There seems to be an inherent value for life in there. My initial thoughts were that perhaps he values life more than Zoro and Luffy do. Perhaps he doesn't view ideals as more important than life, or defeat as worse than death. Perhaps he just wants to live. Perhaps he sees the value of life for some reason because of his experiences. Perhaps he's more equipped and more willing to toss aside ideals and pride for one reason or another. There are a lot of things that could be, and him saying that to Zoro in that fight gives way to multiple interpretations, which I'll describe in a little bit. I had a really great conversation with my Twitch chat about this line, but it seems to be that he doesn't care about dying if it's an honorable death. Just live to die another day, right? Living for another tomorrow is essential. You can't do anything if you're dead. Those, as well as his potential ability to put aside his ideals and pride, are what I got from that line. And I love how it's in total contrast in a lot of ways to how Luffy and Zoro think. It would be boring if every member of the Straw Hat was a kindred spirit. As great as it is to see Luffy and Zoro being kindred spirits, it would be a bit dull if everyone thought the same way. So I love the variation there between Sanji and them. I love that Usopp's goal is much more nebulous and abstract than theirs, just to, challenge himself, to be braver, to just broaden his horizons in a way. And Nami's is not clear, but it's definitely different from theirs as well, so I love the different dimensions. There can be kinship among the crew, but there also has to be differences in the way they view the world in some ways. And so I like this. And then so that was very important stuff for Luffy and primarily Zoro and Mihawk. But we shift from there after their fight to back to the Baratie and back to Zeph and back to Sanji and everything that they represent. We get reintroduced to the idea of the sense of kinship among the crew of the Baratie. Zeph gives them that. He gives them this thing to protect. He gives them this treasure to protect, that being the ship and this place of belonging. And given the emphasis placed on the idea of a treasure, I've talked about this in both previous videos, and how One Piece seems to value it so much, that was an immense gift that Zeph gave them through providing them with this. That was essential. That is an essential part of life for these characters in One Piece, it seems like, to have this thing to want to fight to protect. And so Zeph did them an immense service, and he just changed their lives by providing them with this place to belong to and to protect. And Sanji, upon seeing someone part of the crew who is close to death or wounded or something, goes, "A chef's knife is his soul. Hold on to it tightly while you die, because it is your heart and soul. It is your everything." So again, shows how inexorably linked to the idea of being a chef he is. And Sanji again repeats, "I refuse to get off this ship. I will be here as long as I need to be." That being an indication of as long as Zeph is a part of this ship, I will be here. And there continues to be this conflict with the Krieg's invaders and the Baratie crew. And we get to a point where we have Sanji talking about how he needs to protect this. He needs to protect Baratie restaurant, not because of his connection to the restaurant, but because of what it means to Zeph. He says that the ship is his pride and joy, and he took everything from him, his strength, his dreams, and so he'll never let anything else be taken from him because he's at fault for the reason that he lost everything. And so, hell of a hook for a potential backstory there. So I was just waiting for what that would lead to, because that was really interesting. And at this point, I intended to do the arc in 3 streams, to read it in 3 streams, but we hit that point, and then we got to the backstory, and then I just had to finish it. But so we're eventually introduced to the backstory, where we see a little Sanji who, it's really interesting, because you see how he is now. You see the way he lives, and the way he looks at food and everything, and you see the way he was back then. And back then, he was a little chore boy, or he was doing, little menial tasks here and there for this cook, for this ship called the Orbit. And he worked on this restaurant ship, and he did all these little jobs for them. And we learn here that he wasted food quite a bit. He would see pirates eating the scraps and leftovers, and he'd go, "Why are you eating that? Just throw it out. We have other stuff." And so he would be very wasteful. Compare that to the present, where he's not wasteful at all. He's the opposite of wasteful. He completely values every scrap of food you can get. So it makes you wonder what happened in between there, the before and after snapshots and what's going on. But then we have Zeph, Red Shoes or Red Legs, depending on the localization you get, Zeph, who invaded the Orbit, who invaded the ship. And so the invasion continues of Zeph's pirates. Sanji begins trying to defend himself. We hear through this backstory, the early parts of it, that Sanji wants to discover the All Blue. His dream is to explore the All Blue, which is a place where the east, west, north, and south seas meet, apparently, and the dream of every chef because of all the fish that congregate there. It's a chef's paradise, essentially. And this is Sanji's dream. We finally see what his dream is. It's this mystical place. It's thought of as myth by some people, but it nonetheless is where we see how he relates with Zoro and Luffy, the likes of Zoro and Luffy, because he has this dream to reach this one place, this ultimate, all-encompassing thing that defines who he is, to reach the All Blue, which is very much similar to the idea of Luffy becoming the king of the pirates and finding the One Piece, and Zoro becoming the greatest swordsman who ever lived. These dreams that seem so distant, but the people who have them have such a fervent desire to reach them. They don't see failure as a potential option. They just want to continuously strive there. And it does make you wonder, like the theme of Chapter 22, what if this doesn't exist? What if they can't reach it for whatever reason? And how will they interact with that idea? How will they conceptualize their life if they're not able to achieve this? And the idea of the journey and the process and conducting yourself in service of that journey and all that stuff that's associated with Chapter 22 and the journey and the detours being the experience and the reason for going for that experience in and of itself. All those ideas are kind of captured here as you see that Sanji wants to reach this All Blue. Anyways, things progress. The fight continues. Sanji is plunged into the sea. Zeph seems to try to save him, and then the two are marooned on an island. Zeph tells Sanji, okay, keep an eye out on this side of the island, and I'll stay on this side. And this is your half of the food rations, and I'll have my half. But then we see him stick to himself, and we have a quiet little scene as he begins cutting off his leg, which is why he has a peg leg. He begins cutting off his leg, and the rationale here is obviously he ate his own leg to sustain himself while giving the food source to Sanji. Time passes, 10 days, 30 days, 50 days, and we really see here the desperation. The art is really good. There's a beautiful sunset illustrated here, and we really see the desperation here. What I view and interpret to be part of the reason that Sanji now values food so much, because he knows what it feels to literally starve. I can't even begin to relate to anyone who's literally starved, who's felt that sensation. The most I've gone without eating was the majority of a day, maybe 12 hours at the absolute most. I'm very privileged in that regard. I can't imagine what it feels to have your insides eating you, to be literally starving. But it's very well portrayed through Oda's art here. You see the sheer desperation in Sanji as he continuously looks at the horizon and waits for this thing to come, for a ship to come and rescue them. And then eventually on day 70, I believe it was, after all the food stores are gone, after eating mucky water, or drinking mucky water, day in, day out, just doing whatever he can to survive, you really get why he values food so much and why he values life so much. How much must he have thought of how he could really just die here? Any day now, he could just die. So this experience for me contextualizes why he values life so much and why he values food so much and why he wants to provide food to those who need it, regardless of their intent in a lot of ways, because he knows the pain and devastation that can come from starving. Then he confronts Zeph on day 70, I think it was, and he sees the truth. It comes to him. Zeph sacrificed himself, ate his own leg, his means of being a pirate, for him. And he says here, I didn't give you any reason to be kind to me. Why were you so kind to me? And that immediately, I won't spoil it, but that immediately made me think of the idea, the theme associated with Zidane in Final Fantasy IX. You don't need a reason to help people. I'm not saying that's a prevalent theme here, but I just immediately made that parallel because FF9 is one of my favorite stories of all time. And so I couldn't help but see a little bit of a biased parallel in that line there. But then he asks him, why did you do this for me? And then we see that Zeph says, I have the same dream as you, to reach the All Blue. And if you go back to the scene where Zeph hears him say that he wants to reach the All Blue, Sanji is saying this to everyone. All these people are laughing because this is such this far-off dream, this fantastical, it's not real, these people say. They laugh, they spit on his dream. But what's very key is we see a panel of Zeph who looks on very seriously. He takes his dream seriously. And that's because he admires the conviction and he has the same dream. So he gives up piracy, he helps him, he gives him the food, he gives him all the means that are possible to survive because he wants him to carry on and achieve his dream for him. He inherits his will, he inherits his legacy. Because his pirating days are probably over. His legs were his weapon, and he cut one of them off to survive and to ultimately become a cook, because he ended up valuing that more than his piracy, because he could have just cut off his arms. It would have been kind of difficult because you need the arms, but you get what I mean. This was pointed out in chat. He could have cut off his arms, and he could have still been a pirate, but you need your arms to be a chef, and he wasn't ready to give that up. And so he does that. He hones in and fixates on, okay, I'm going to be a cook. That's what I'm going to be. That's my lot in life. He gives up on his dream to have Sanji inherit that, to pass it on to him, to give him that impetus, and then this dream becomes their shared dream. It's a beautiful, beautiful backstory. Maybe my favorite. It's right up there with Usopp so far. And then someone else in chat pointed out, both Zeph and Shanks sacrificed a body part for the next generation to carry on the things that they taught them, or their dream, or their spirit, or legacy, which is a beautiful little parallel between the older generation, you know? Might be a bit of a stretch, but I also see a bit of a parallel between Zeph and Shanks in that being a pirate for both of them involves exploring the experience of adventuring with friends. Something to this extent is said by Zeph. Exploring it with your crewmates, with your friends. The moment-to-moment experience and the spirit of piracy is in taking all of that in and adventuring and just immersing yourself in what it means to really explore the world and go on these adventures and detours. And that was very similar to what Shanks felt about piracy and how it contrasted with Buggy. And then so I love how Krieg's idea of war and what his goal and focus in life really is so different from Buggy's, which is so different from Kudo's, which is so different from Shanks, but then Shanks's is in some ways similar to Zeph. I just like that. I like all the different viewpoints of piracy. It continues to be expanded upon. And then we can go from a parallel between Shanks and Zeph to a parallel between Luffy and Sanji. Zoro as well, but in particular these two with regards to their mentors in a way. Both of them striving for this thing that may be beyond their reach, this thing that is so fantastical a concept to strive for. The One Piece, becoming King of the Pirates, and the All Blue. But nonetheless, they dream of it anyway. So there's their kinship. That's where they're kindred spirits. Sanji with Luffy and then Zoro as well. This dream that seems so ephemeral, yet it's so, in their eyes, so material at the same time that they feel like they can almost reach out and grasp it despite how far it is. Bit of a parallel with The Great Gatsby. Bit of a weird parallel there. But that dream of this thing that's just beyond your reach, and you could just if you could just reach out and grab it, but it's so distant and yet you long for it anyway. I don't know. But yeah, this backstory gives us everything we need to know. It shows us the origin of Baratie. It also states that Zeph, through not wanting pirates to suffer through similar things that he suffered through, that hunger, that starvation, that pain, wanted to make an ocean-going restaurant, a ship that is a restaurant, to serve customers, to prevent that, which is a lovely thought. And as well as it being this place to belong for outcasts and things like that, these cooks that had no place to belong, the sentiment and themes behind Baratie as a concept is just really admirable and indirectly characterizes Zeph and makes him a bigger man, you know? And so it comes to a point where Geen betrays them. He comes with the reinforcements, and this is all directly caused by Sanji feeding him in the first place, right? Sanji fed him. This act of kindness, in turn, stimulated them to come back and invade their ship. And so I wondered at this point, knowing what it led to, would Sanji have regretted what he did? And I don't think he would have, because of the way in which his backstory shows how valuable food is, how it is the essence of life, the essence of connection. It is essential to everything, and it is why he needs to share it, regardless of the morality behind the action or what it could lead to. He doesn't think about any of that. He just knows how beautiful food is. I don't think he would have regretted it. I don't think he would have regretted it at all. And to that end, I just love how the backstory just shows us, it fills in so many gaps for Sanji and helps us see why he acts the way he does in so many ways. And there's a line from Sanji here as, in the midst of all this fighting, the question is proposed to him, why are you still standing up? And he says, so that for one moment longer this place can remain. So that he can protect Zeph's treasure. So that he can set himself aside to protect and repay his debt to the man. And I just think it's a beautiful line. And Luffy is observing all of this. I made a note that said, Luffy observing kinda peak, because he just continues to watch, to evaluate, to see if these people that he observes pass this threshold of respect for them to him, then welcome them into his circle. Sanji kind of already had been past that threshold when he wanted him to be his cook after he saw his act of kindness towards Geen. But nonetheless, he continues to observe and continues to evaluate and appraise. And then it comes to a point where Luffy is absolutely willing to once again put his life on the line for Sanji and Zeph. It doesn't take much for him to fight for other people, to protect their honor as they protect their treasures. And then there's a moment with Luffy where Sanji is essentially intending to die with the ship to protect his promise to Zeph, and he's gonna go down with the ship. That's what he intends to do. And Luffy in this moment gets so furious with him, and he says, getting killed is no way to repay your debt. He didn't save your life, Zeph didn't save your life, so you could throw it away. And I love that, because what it shows is a deep amount of open-mindedness from Luffy. The open-mindedness that Oda sort of encourages his audience, his readers, to have when seeing these different sorts of philosophies. Luffy applies it here, because we know he's someone who puts his life on the line all the damn time. He put his life on the line for other people this very arc, for something that others may view as trivial. But he views this from the perspective of someone who values life in a different way than him. He sees what life means for Sanji, and what Sanji's life would mean for Zeph, and he puts himself in their shoes and is able to apply their standards and their ideals to the situation to tell him, what are you doing? You're betraying, you're missing the forest for the trees here. Don't you dare sacrifice your life for something like this. Because while Luffy doesn't value life in the same way, while it doesn't take him much to put his life on the line, he knows that life is different for Sanji. He views life differently than him. He perhaps values life more, and maybe the idea of pride less than Luffy. The scales are tipped in a different way. And so Luffy understands that and says, this life holds such value for you, and you're going to throw it away? The life he sacrificed so much for you to keep, you're going to throw this away? That's a disgrace. You can't do that. And that open-mindedness is everything to me. It added a new layer to Luffy that I really loved, and it was this moment where I said to my chat, okay, I think Luffy's my top 1 character in One Piece finally. I think he's eclipsed Shanks. This was the moment. A bit of a spoiler for my character rankings, my top 10 later on, but yeah, this was the moment for me. And then in the midst of his betrayal, Geen has a really interesting thought process. He says, Sanji saved my life, so I'm gonna take his myself. And so a fight ensues from here. But at the end of the fight, or once it gets to the point where Gin has to pull the trigger, essentially, he can't do it. He can't do it because of Sanji's act of kindness. He can't get that out of his mind. And so here is where we see it did matter. It had huge ramifications. His kindness, it may have been a bit foolish in that it caused him to go to Krieg and then to come back around and attack the Baratie. But in the end, it is what spared him. It's what spared the ship from Gin. And so it did matter. It had a lasting impact. The dynamic between Gin and Sanji throughout the arc was really good for me. I thought it was really cool, and their grudging respect for one another, I just liked it a lot. And this is kind of the apex of that. So these little acts of compassion and kindness and empathy and sharing this universal language of food with others, it did matter. It can make the largest ripple effects from just tiny little acts of kindness. Zeph's act of kindness through providing the rations for Sanji, the idea of how valuable that food was for his life, for that relationship, and then how Sanji then goes and uses it for Gin, and how it ends up leading to this, and how it represents their kind of rivalry bond at the same time. Food is beginning to end so encapsulative of the spirit of this arc, of these connections that are made between people, of how it nourishes your life and enriches everything about you, not just physically and biologically, but your relationship with others and what food means, and how it brings people together. And nonetheless, Gin is still on Krieg's side and he still admires his strength, but he's not willing to go to that length because of what Sanji did for him. And what I like here is throughout the arc, Sanji seems to shift his thoughts a little bit. At the beginning of the arc, he was talking about how it's so easy to abandon your dreams or put them off in service of living. And after chatting with my chat, I think I've come up with why. So I talked about why he values life. I think it has to do with his experiences on the island. He'd come to value life more than he had previously, and as such, I think he views life as more valuable than the likes of Luffy or Zoro, just because of that experience. But there's also more to it. He put his life aside, essentially, to live for Zeph's dream because he felt indebted to it. So being someone who is experienced with abandoning that sort of thing, he speaks to Zoro and says, look, it's easy, just abandon it for now. Live to fight another day. So it's a coalescing of those two ideas, of his value for life, and then his tendency or adherence to putting his dream and pride and everything he is, his dream for the All Blue, aside for Zeph. It's those two coalescing in his line there, in my opinion, to Zoro, of just put your dreams aside for now. It's so easy to abandon your dreams and live another day. I think that's what that line signifies. And before, I didn't really clock the relation it had to his indebtedness to Zeph and how he put his life aside and his dreams aside for Zeph. I only really related it to his feelings about how valuable life was. But through conversations and interpretations shared through my chat, I was able to see that, and I thank them for that because it's a more well-rounded interpretation of the character and that line. But nonetheless, I think his views about what it means to stand for your dream and what it means to fight and protect your dream and your treasure shift as he sees Zoro fighting for it, as he sees Luffy fighting for other people doing it, and he sees what Luffy's all about and understands him and what he fights for. And so I think Sanji's ideals shift a little bit, and he finds it within himself to become more okay with being self-interested and living for himself. And then so I think his motives, in relation to that, his motives, the way in which he lived for Zeph, he lived for another person, this indebtedness to Zeph, how he wasn't able to put his own dreams first, they come to the fore in chapter 67. After all the action's done, after it's sort of the falling action and the dust has settled, Luffy asks him and is very insistent about Sanji joining his crew. And Sanji says, no, I can't. I have this debt to pay. These guys can't be counted on. We have to maintain the Baratie. I can't do it, but one day I will reach the Grand Line. Now's not the time, but one day I will. And then he can't help it but smile and say, hey Luffy, you ever heard of the All Blue? And Luffy says, no, what is that? And it's so beautiful, because there's a cutaway. You just see them conversing in silence. There's no dialogue, as Sanji talks about his dream and how beautiful the All Blue is, and how wondrous it is. And Luffy reciprocates that enthusiasm. You see wide-eyed curiosity in his eyes as they both talk. These two dreamers talk about the beauty of this far-off thing that Sanji aspires to reach, and Luffy can directly relate. And Zeph watches in silence at this moment and sees that this dream has taken hold of him. Perhaps as a result, probably as a result of seeing through Zoro, through Luffy, two people who put their own ideals and put their own pride and dreams at the forefront of their ambitions and fight for that. He realized what he wanted to make of his life, eventually, and his heart kind of screams out for doing it right now, but he has this debt that he has to pay to Zeph because of the pain he caused him before, because of what he views as him taking these things away from him. But Zeph does something wonderful by convincing the crew to sort of shoo him away as Sanji cooks a soup, and they go, "Oh, it's disgusting, it's horrible. Ugh, we don't want you here anymore, get off here," as a way to get him to live for himself and find the All Blue for himself. It's a beautiful little gesture that I love, and I love that Luffy is in the corner saying, "This food is delicious, what do you guys mean? It's great." It's wonderful. But it comes to this, at the end of the day, Zeph says, "Take Sanji with you. The Grand Line is his dream, All Blue is his dream," and the moment when Sanji realizes what he was doing for him, what he wanted him to do, there's some beautiful expressions as he kind of hears through the window the employees, the other cooks saying, "That was a mean thing that Zeph made us say. Man, that soup is delicious, give me some more." And Sanji can hear all of it filtering through the window, and he just goes, "I can hear you." It's a beautiful moment. And an important line here is that Zeph says, "I've cooked on all the oceans of the world. If you want to measure up to my excellence as a cook, you better explore all the oceans yourself." And that nudges him out. That nudges him out to live out his own dreams. And it's about time. It's about time for Sanji to live for himself, to not be chained down by these debts. And so I love this whole sequence of Chapter 67. Luffy trying to recruit him, ever heard of the All Blue, the childlike wonder, the cutaway, Zeph observing, and then this little scheme to get him to leave. It's great. And so Sanji becomes the newest member of the crew. But I love Luffy's reaction to it before it becomes official, because Zeph and the cooks and everyone say, "Okay, Sanji can join your crew," and Luffy says no. He wanted desperately for Sanji to be the cook on his crew. He wanted that more than anything, and he really was very insistent about it and passionate about it, but Sanji told him, "I don't want to," and so that's what Luffy says. I don't want him to join my crew if he doesn't want to. I want someone to be willing to join my crew for that, and I just love that. It takes into account the needs and sentiment and heart of the people that he wants to join. So if they aren't full-heartedly committed, then he's not going to force them. And I love that. There's some parallels with Luffy and Gon from Hunter x Hunter in that way, from a certain perspective. And then we see some fishmen that get washed up aboard a fishman. I don't know much about what's upcoming, but I have heard something like Fishman Island, and this seems to be a precursor or a hint or foreshadowing to that. I don't know. But the fishmen wash up on board, and Yosaku is there, and he gives Luffy an update about them pursuing Nami, which is where him and Usopp have been, and he says that Nami has gone to some incredible place, and Luffy says, "I don't really get it, but let's go, let's pursue Nami." And then here Sanji finally says, "Officially, I'll join your crew. Let's go, take me with you. You have some foolish dreams and you chase them, so I'll chase mine too along with you." And we see a beautiful little flashback montage of how Baratie came to be after they were saved on the island, after 85 days or whatever it was. And we see Sanji slowly growing closer and closer to the idea of Baratie, how he started smoking, how he grew in stature and confidence as a chef, and all of that. And it's really emotional and really integrative with his departure and what that means for Zeph and the rest of the cooks. And then we have this big, beautiful, emotional outpouring from Sanji, where he just goes, "Chef Zeph, all these years I lived under your crap roof. I owe you my life, I'll never forget you." Zeph tears up, Sanji's crying, everyone's crying, everyone's saying we're all gonna miss you, and then he just says goodbye. He's off to follow his dreams, and it's a beautiful emotional farewell, akin to the Syrup Village farewell between Usopp and his crew, and then they set sail, and that's it. They seem to be pursuing Nami to some unknown place. I did hear that the next arc was called Arlong Park, I believe, so maybe that's where Nami is, maybe that's where she's gone. The arc seems to hint at the idea that Nami is going to be central, like I've said before, so I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah, Baratie, it was great. the most well-rounded and substantial character work, the best moments, the themes carried through of found family and what food means on so many levels, and the themes associated with Sanji and Zeph, and what it means to live for yourself, and all that, Zoro's conviction, and Mihawk's introduction, and everything. It was all really good, and there wasn't really a lull. It was paced really well. I think the art was very good and effective, and it was just great. If I were to give this arc a rating, it would be like a solid 8, which is definitely the best arc so far. If I were to give One Piece a rating so far, it would be a very strong 7 to maybe a light 8, something like that. It's been super enjoyable so far, and it is made better and enhanced by the community, like I said. So thank you guys so much for that. So with regards to my top 10 characters, there's been a bit of a shuffle. Honorable mentions, a couple of them would be Buggy and Gin, but number 10 would be Krieg. Number 9 would be Kudo, who I think is still a little bit more interesting through his motivations and how he paralleled or contrasted and was the antithesis to Usopp. But both of them very solid antagonists for their respective arcs. Number 8 would be Zeph. There's a bit of a step up from 9 to 8. Zeph was really solid, made me emotional a few times. Love how he came to stand for something and how he came to represent so much in the ways in which he parallels Shanks and how his dynamic with Sanji parallels Luffy's dynamic with Shanks and all of that. I think he's very admirable in a lot of ways, and the way he brought together the Baratie, the ways in which he wanted Sanji to live for himself and carry on his legacy and his dream with him as well and free him from those burdens and obligations. Zeph is just super solid start to finish, and I like him a lot. Then it's tough. It's a toss-up between number 6 and 7, but I think 7 would be Mihawk. One of the most effective character introductions from the very beginning. I love the way in which he grew to admire Zoro, Luffy, how his ideals were on display, and how he becomes this benchmark, not just in terms of strength, but in terms of the way he conducts himself in a way, the way he's so menacing and yet so admirable and such a kindred spirit in some ways. Mihawk is so raw, and he'd probably be number 7. Number 6 would be Nami. Not a ton added to her, but there is that really great hook, and I'm really anticipating to see where the story goes with her. Number 5 would be Usopp, who didn't really progress too much, but he's still really solid in terms of what we got from Syrup Village. That hasn't escaped my mind at all. This arc didn't really do too much for him, but it progressed things nicely in certain small ways, and he's still a top 5 character at the moment. Pretty damn close between number 4 and 3, but I think number 4 is going to be Sanji. Like I said, I think the most complex character, the character from which you can glean the most different sorts of interpretations from at this moment. Just the way in which he views food, and the way he set aside his dreams, and the way you can glean different meanings from certain lines he says to Zoro about abandoning your dreams, and his indebtedness to Zeph, and his backstory and how it relates now. He's a super rich character, and he slots easily into my top 5. I was kind of tempted to make him my number 3, but for now, we'll put him at number 4. Number 3 is Shanks. Nothing's really changed about Shanks. I love Shanks, but the characters keep getting better and better, whereas he stays the same. So when he was number 1, now he's down to number 3. Number 2 is Zoro. This arc did so much for Zoro. I already described how before, I'm not going to harp on about it, but it just enhanced and optimized everything that he is at this moment, and just storytelling brilliance took him to insane levels. I didn't really believe that I could connect to him on this level, but his show of conviction was so emotional and weighty and dramatic and raw that I couldn't help but to be swept into it. Again, his fight with Mihawk, the peak of the series so far. And then my number 1, Luffy. I've talked about the different ways in which this arc elevated him, and yeah, he is, in my opinion, at this moment, the best character in One Piece, for a bunch of different reasons, a lot of which I've described. We'll see if that continues, we'll see. But at the moment, Luffy is 1. So just to go through them again, number 10, Krieg, number 9, Captain Kudo, number 8, Zeph, number 7, Mihawk, number 6, Nami, number 5, Usopp, number 4, Sanji, number 3, Shanks, number 2, Zoro, number 1, Luffy. Anyways, this was a very long review. We'll see if I can learn to make these more concise as I go on, but hey, I'm going to be unfiltered for a lot of these. Hopefully you enjoyed. And yeah, I think that's about all I have to say. If you would like early access to the next review, of the next arc, that is currently available on Patreon. That's up to you, just as a little bit of something extra. And in addition to that, just a quick reminder that if you would like to join in for the live streams where I read all of these, you can head over to my account on Twitch. And if you want your comment to be highlighted in a future video, just use the hashtag AJPiece somewhere in your comment, and it'll be put into the pool of potential selections. I think that's all I've got to say. Thank you for joining me once again, and I look forward to experiencing and sharing more of this story with you guys. Many thanks for watching.